Throughout time, I noticed my story being passed around online, showing up on different sites, comment sections, and even different story sites. You might have even read about it yourself, or maybe heard people talking about it. But if you like, I'll tell you straight from myself. I do want to clear up some misinformation that's been going around as to what really happened. If anything, I'm sharing this because you never know. It can save someone's life when you're hiking, camping, or doing anything in nature, especially if you're separated from your group for even a moment. So a few friends and I go on a camping trip for a few days in Yosemite Valley. I don't remember the trail that we were on, only that we were hiking towards a small lake. What stood out to me even then was how few people there was. We did pass another group earlier in the day, but otherwise the area felt quiet for a place that was known. The first night was well, the only night it took for this whole thing to happen, that is. We ate some food, talked around the fire, and everything else was going good. It was the second night when things happened. We had built a small fire, and we were getting ready to go to bed when it came time to stash the bear canister. I grabbed it and walked away from camp. I remember thinking I had gone far enough, maybe a few hundred feet, and I threw it as hard as I could. The issue was that it hit the ground, and it rolled downhill, so without really stopping to think, I went after it. When I finally got to it and picked it up, I turned around to head back to camp. That's when I realized I couldn't see the fire anymore. At first I wasn't too worried. I figured I would just walk back uphill and I would see the glow in just a bit. But it didn't. I kept moving, looking through the trees, waiting to see the light or hear my friends talking. But there was nothing. I guess I went further than I realized when I was trying to hide it. That's honestly what I always assumed happened. So I started calling out their names expecting an answer, but nobody responded. That's when panic really began to set in. I spent what felt like hours walking in different directions, completely off the trail, I guess, trying to retrace my steps. I might have crossed over the trail at some point. I'm sure I did, but I honestly don't know. I did leave my flashlight back in the tent, and the moon only helped through the trees in certain spots, leaving most of the forest in near total darkness. Fuck, at this point I was scared. But what scared me the most wasn't just being lost out there. It was the feeling that other things were out there with me. As I kept walking, I had this sense that something was moving along with me, maybe 50 yards off to the side, keeping pace with me. Every time that I stopped to listen, it stopped too. When I started moving again, it felt like it would do the same. I never did see anything, but I knew something was out there. I just knew it. At some point I would look where the noise was coming from, but I couldn't see anything. Mind you, it was dark as shit out there. Now something that I learned since is that when people get lost in forested areas with few landmarks, their instincts often work against them. The natural response is to keep moving, trying to retrace steps or find something familiar. But that always leads to some turns, backtracking, and even walking in what ends up being circles. It's a natural movement to drift slightly in one direction, often to the left, which can keep someone looping without even realizing it. Obviously, the best advice when you get lost is to stop, stay put, calm down, and let everything reset. But I know from experience, that's difficult to do when fear starts to take over, which is exactly what happened in this case. My fear and being exhausted took over, and I needed some light. I did something reckless, so don't judge me. I was trying my best to survive at this point, and I was scared as well. I'm not sure how much time passed. I think it must have been an hour or so. I'm not sure. Eventually, fear and being exhausted took over, and I knew I needed some light. So I gathered a large pile of sticks and used my lighter to start a fire. It caught much faster than I expected. I backed away and I put myself near the top of a small drop, maybe about 10 feet down, with the fire between me and whatever I thought might be out there. Completely drained, scared, and regretting ever coming here. I laid down and tried to get some sleep. At this point I figured that daylight was my best chance of getting out of this situation. I'm not sure how long I was asleep for, when I suddenly woke up with the feeling that somebody's hand had grabbed my lower leg from over the edge of the drop and was slowly pulling me to it. I yelled, and I jumped up instantly. My heart started racing, and I grabbed a piece of wood from the fire. I swung it around, but there was nothing there. No sound, no movement. At this point I didn't stay where I was. Fuck this. I started walking again, moving fast, just always looking over my shoulder, and I still felt like I was being watched. I started hearing that same echo again. I'm not sure how much I walked for, but I could see that the sun was finally coming up. That's when I began shouting again, louder this time, calling for anyone who might hear me. Eventually I did stumble onto a trail. A woman was walking a short distance ahead of me, and I called out to her, telling her that I was lost. She gave me some water, and she even stayed with me as we went to go find the park rangers. To my surprise, they told me they already knew I was missing. My friends had reported me missing that night, and the search was being organized when I showed back up. Now, I've gone back and forth over the past few decades trying to make sense of what happened. I know how confusing the woods can be at night, especially without a light. I know how fear can affect you, how your own footsteps can make it seem like something is following you, and how the space between sleep and waking up can also make strange emotions, feelings, maybe even somebody grabbing you. However, I don't dismiss the paranormal, but I also believe in being rational before trying to connect dots that might not even belong together. I mean, I don't think it was anything paranormal. Or was it? The terrain in Yosemite doesn't help. There's walls and formations that can distort sound in some strange way. Footsteps and movements, even your own breathing, it can echo and travel in directions that don't make sense, which only add to the confusion. I know people might wonder about drinking, so I'll be upfront about it. We were drinking, but just a little bit. That was pretty consistent with how we always were. I smoked cigarettes at this time, which is the reason why the lighter was on me. If anything, the alcohol made me more relaxed earlier in the night. Even from what I was told after, the canister itself was found only a couple hundred yards from camp, which makes sense. What they never found was the spot where I started the second fire. I think the slope of the hill must have just barely blocked the light from our campfire, and once I lost that point, everything went downhill. If I chose the wrong direction from that point, and I'm sure I did, it does explain how I became lost. Even knowing all this, the way everything lines up just doesn't sit right with me. I have been thinking about this a lot, how I could have kept walking the wrong way, or what if I never found that trail. I do wonder how close I might have been to places where other people have disappeared in that park. Maybe it was nothing. I hope it was nothing. The Mannequin Cave is the most recent and significant subject of urban legend around our high school. They say it's just a deep tunnel of dark rocks from the side of the gray-green hillside, miles away from the edge of town. You have to drive along the dirt track to even get close, and then there's like 2 or 3 whole fields you need to walk through as well. A pair of hikers discovered the place and posted a bunch of pictures on social media. The flash effect made all of the images look fake or photoshopped, but one of our classmates tells us that he's been there himself. He swears by it. that the cave is real, that the photos are real. And so we done what any group of teenagers would do, given the circumstances. Something stupid. The three of us have parked up. Well, Delaney has. She's the one who drove. And we're walking now as a trio through the wild grass fields, the long blades blowing against our lower legs in the cool breeze. I glance up to the grim sky as a lone drop of rain lands on my forehead. It shouldn't be far now. Hopefully we'll make it before the weather breaks. I put my backpack further up into my shoulders. We're sleeping over, of course, staying the night. Our parents all think that we're at each other's house. Lexi has the booze. I have the weed. Every step that we take closer to the cave, the anxiety grows. It's unspoken, but I can feel it radiating between us like an energy. No one wants to be the one to speak first. What began as an exciting idea in the bright light of the day now seems scary and short-sighted. I didn't want to bring up the whole turning back, about just abandoning this little excursion of ours. Before I could come up with the appropriate words, Lexi speaks. Guys, look over there. That's it. That's the cave. She points across the fields to a cluster of low hills. The edge of one such great mound is marked by stone, and my stomach starts to make noises. The rain starts to patter all around us, and so we pick up the pace. We make our way around the edge of the hill, and the cluster stone is confirmed to comprise the sides of the tunnel. This is it. The entrance to the mannequin cave. We stop at the edge and stand in silence, listening. A low rumble, like the opening note of a slow, sad song. Are we sure about this, guys? That's what I wanted to say, but instead I'm just like, wow, are we ready for this? Delaney turns to me and grins. You know it, girl. Lexi manages a weak smile, but it's like, shall we go in then? Drawing my flashlight from the side of my backpack. I'm not sure why you're asking us, says Lexi. This was your idea after all, Allie. I laugh awkwardly, but she doesn't laugh back. She's been acting really weird today. Well, lately. Even before this little excursion of ours was planned, I wasn't sure she was even gonna come. I kinda wish she hadn't, to be honest. But I doubt just Delaney and I would have been there to spend the night. I click the flashlight on as the rain starts to pour, and the quiet thunder rolls softly in the far distance. I step foot into the cave. Delaney and Lexi follow on behind. Our footsteps echo around the wide, stony walls as we push deeper into the hillside. The sounds of the rain pick up, then gradually fade into the background. The beam of Delaney's flashlight catches on something. A sentence, scrawled in white across the gray-black stone wall of the tunnel. Don't turn out the light, it says. And then get the shiver going down my body. Creepy, Delaney says, forcing out a little laugh. Lexi and I join in, but there's no humor in it. This is crazy, I think to myself. We clearly don't want to be here. None of us do. I'm sure they wouldn't make fun of me. Just say it. Let's go back. But go where? All our parents think that we're staying over at someone else's home. I'm working over the logistics in my head when we round the corner, and the figures of the cave's namesake finally become clear. They're more scary by far than they were on the pictures. Observe with curious amusement around the classroom table in the warm light of a school day. My breath catches in my throat, and I stop at once. We all do. My flashlight beams cast dozens upon dozens of long and distorted shadows out into the cave. The lights catch on terrible figures. Mannequins, grotesque and frozen in place. Once a pale cream or white, but now stained in green and gray and in brown from the grim damp of the cave. They stand at various intervals all around, differing in size and height, but they're all featureless, formless, but for a pair of painted-on eyes. Some of the mannequins are looking at each other. One of them has its hands together, as much as the joints in its fingers will allow. Once it's huddled by the cave wall, staring at the ground, and one of them stares right ahead, back at me. I stop at the disturbing scene, but Lexi, to my surprise, pushes on. She strides right past the mannequins and deeper into the cave, shouting loud. Hello, friends. Is she trying to fucking prove something? To us. To herself, maybe. Regardless, her words, loud as they are, they make me cringe in the relative quiet of the cave. I hear the thunder rumble softly in the far distance. Lexi, I hiss. You don't need to be so loud. She then turns back to me, her eyes shining in the reflection of the flashlight, glittering bright in that beautiful shade of green of hers. Why? They're not real, Allie. They're just dummies. She raises a hand and knocks on the head of the mannequin beside her. I don't fail to notice that she does hesitate before doing so. The sound echoes around the cave. Lexi, Delaney says softly, come on. We've been friends for years and years, but Lexi does have a habit of acting weird sometimes. She then rolls her eyes and strides off deeper into the cave. Delaney and I exchange a look, and then follow behind her, weaving our way through the silent but watchful crowd. Her phone lights up with the occasional flash as she takes photos of our surroundings. We pass the figures by, mannequin after mannequin. I hate them. I can't help but make the occasional eye contact with the terrible figures, wincing every time that I do. It almost feels like they're staring right into me, through me, maybe. My breathing is loud and shallow. They watch silently as we make our way between them, and we eventually catch up to Lexi, who has come to a stop by a jagged outcrop of cave wall. This is the place from the pictures, she says. And sure enough, a pair of initials have been carved into the rock. There's about 10 or so pairs. The lowermost of these pairs, R.M. Ryan March, Delaney says, the boy from our class. So he has been here after all, I say with a surprise. Can't believe it. He didn't spend the night though, did he? No, I don't think so. He would have said otherwise, says Lexi. I can't wait to tell everyone about this. Make sure you're all recording, so we can edit the video when we get home. We set up our sleeping arrangements and began sipping on the spirits. My nerves even start to settle, a little bit. There's one terrifying moment where I mistake a mannequin just behind me for Delaney, but we laugh about it and move on. I physically pick the mannequin up with a grunt and move it slightly further away, moving it so that it faces away from our sleeping area. I then start thinking that maybe this could be fun after all. We make a little fire and start talking around it, sharing the weed, but disagreements as to the safety of lighting a fire in the cave, even one as wide and big as this one, means that we eventually put it out, replacing it with a far less exciting portable lamp. I'm actually sort of relieved, to tell the truth. The jumping, flickering flames of the fire gave unsettling life to the surrounding mannequins, grown all the larger and more silently fearsome in the dancing shadows. Occasionally, my eyes fall upon a mannequin that I hadn't noticed before, almost like if it had crept closer in the darkness, watching from a distance, frozen in its pose. But most of them are standing up, but I don't fail to notice that one or two lie prone on the floor, sleeping, one might think, if not for the wide and staring painted eyes. I look away and back to the lamp, losing my night vision in the process. Delaney and Lexi are arguing. A disagreement has arisen about whether or not to explore deeper into the cave. What's the point in spending the night if we're not even gonna explore? She's asking, an edge in her voice. That's far enough, Delaney says. We made it to the initials. We don't need to go any deeper. There could be anything down there. She raises her hand and shines her flashlight down the tunnel. Unless it's my imagination. The poses of the mannequins have become more contorted the deeper they go, more unnatural, bent, awkward shapes, head screwed on backwards. The cave rumbles as Delaney brings the beam back over towards Lexi. Everyone at school is going to ask why we didn't go deeper, and what are we going to tell them? What are you trying to prove exactly, Lexi? Delaney is asking. She seems to have picked up on the same vibe that I had noticed earlier. Excuse me, Lexi replies, sitting straight up as she does so. Lexi, it's okay to be a little scared, you know. This place is scary, I say to her, but she bristles in response. What is it with you guys? I didn't say I was scared. I appreciate you not putting words in my mouth, Allie. Delaney's getting pissed off. Lexi, just take it easy. She doesn't take this well. Why did you guys even invite me here anyway? She starts asking all defensively. To make up the numbers. Is that why? It's the alcohol talking. I know it. But if I mention that, it'll just make her more angry. That's not true, Lex. You know that's not true, isn't it? She says, taking another sip. Delaney stands up. Do you really fucking hold us in such low regard? We're your fucking friends, Lexi. Why do you always do this? Always? Lexi replies, angry over the low and shuddering noise of the cave. Fuck you guys. And without a single word, she kicks over the lamp. It rattles as it hits the ground, and we're all plunged into total darkness. Lexi, Delaney shouts. I call after her, but the girl doesn't respond. We then hear her footsteps disappearing off into the darkness. Then we see the beam of her flashlight appear behind the silhouettes of the mannequins. Delaney finds the lamp, and she gives it a little shake. It returns, thankfully, as Lexi strides away. Lexi, we call after her, and I make to follow. But Delaney holds my arm. Let her cool down. She'll come back when she's ready. You know how she gets. I sit back down. I don't know, D. I really feel like we shouldn't be leaving her alone. Delaney scoffs. She's the one leaving us alone. She's as freaked out as we are. She'll be back. I agree. But the night drags on, and Lexi doesn't come back. 30 minutes or so pass as we drink and smoke, and then a full hour. Finally, I can't stand it anymore. Alright, D. I'm freaked out, alright? We let this go on for way too long. I'm not gonna be able to sleep until we're all together. Let's go find her. Delaney agrees, though she sounds a little embarrassed. Maybe she's feeling guilty about letting her go off by herself. Yeah, we shouldn't have let her leave like that. She has shit going on at home, doesn't she? Fuck, I shouldn't have been that way. She then rubs a hand over her face. Let's go get her. We rise to a stand, picking up the lamp, and our eyes refocus on our surroundings for the first time. Since Lexi disappeared, the mannequins have moved. Every single one of them. Each and every one of their heads has twisted to stare down into the darkness, deeper into the tunnel, the same direction that Lexi ran off. I slam my hands to my mouth, drunken and foolish, dropping the lamp in the process. It takes another hit as it smacks into the ground, and this time, it shatters. We're once again plunged into total suffocating darkness. Panic starts to set in. I scrabble around my belt for my flashlight, but it's not there. I can't find it. Delaney, my flashlight. I can't find it. I can't fucking find it. It's alright. Delaney tries to reassure me, but I can hear a violent tremble in her voice. I got mine. She clicks it on and swings the beam all around us, revealing that the heads of the mannequins have changed once again. They're staring at us. Every pair of painted eyes. Every single one. I stifle a scream, blood cold and fast in my veins. I grab onto Delaney's arm, then release her as I spy my flashlight on the ground. Dropping down quickly to pick it up, "Oh fuck," Delaney says, sweat starting to bud down the side of her face. "D," I hiss. "What do we do?" We exchange a look. Lexi is likely still lost in the depths of the cave. Do we go after her, or do we get the fuck out? Something moves in the darkness. We spin on the spot, beams going across the army of silent figures, and then a void-like shadow, low and creeping, and never in my direct line of sight. Something slithers around the edges of my vision, and also the cave. It flows impossibly like water from the far, in the unknown depths of the tunnel, and it's big. Difficult to say how big, but it's bigger than Delaney or I, and it's snaking this way, over the dark grooves in the rock, behind and between the shadows of the mannequins. It's coming. There's no words exchanged between Delaney and I, but we run, back towards the entrance as fast as we can. We round the corner, slamming into mannequins and knocking them chaotically to the ground as we do so. But the entrance is nowhere in sight. At first I think it's only difficult to see because of the darkened midnight sky, but there is no sky visible at all. The cave just keeps curling around, round and around in a wide arc. And the mannequins do not come to an end. There's only more, and they're all staring. "Where's the entrance?" I scream in panic. "Delaney, where's the fucking entrance?" "I don't fucking know," she replies through tears. Flashlight beams darting from side to side and casting up enormous and distorted shadows against the walls. I look back. The inky blackness from the back of the cave is closer now, much closer. And as if in response to my glance, it billows like smoke up the side of the cave wall. It reflects the scene below like an oil spillage, making it almost impossible to focus on. But there is something brutally single-minded and animalistic about its movements. Not looking where I'm going, I stumble over a groove in the ground, and I tumble to the floor. The beam of my flashlight goes wide. "No!" I scream, as my flashlight clatters across the rock. I reach out for it, grabbing it and swinging it back up towards this thing, and the light reveals it, close and almost upon me. And yet, the thing has come to a stop, angry, swirling and swarming and hissing, the sound echoing up and all around as it billows before me. But between us is a mannequin. It wasn't there before. I could have sworn. Otherwise I would have crashed right into it. But there it stands, facing away from me, staring up at this thing with its arms out wide. It glows bright in the beam of my light, and I scream again as I feel a hand on my shoulder. "We gotta go," Delaney shouts. She hauls me up, and away we sprint, the lights of our flashlights revealing the featureless faces of the mannequins. Featureless, except of course for those eyes. Those painted eyes. Some watching us run right past, some staring back into the tunnel, in the direction of whatever this thing is. Some of the mannequins stand, with their arms outstretched, almost like asking for a hug, but we pass by all of them, darting from side to side. Some point down the tunnel. The hissing of this thing grows louder and louder, like a swarm of furious alien insects. "Lexi, where are you?" I shout. There's no response, except for the sound that this shadow behind us is making. Up ahead, it would seem, the tunnel splits off into two. Impossible, surely, since there was no such split on the way down. But we're all well beyond the realms of the possible now. A lone mannequin stands at the end of it. Its arm is raised. Its fingers are bent at the joints, and it's pointing to the right. The flashlight beams of both Delaney and I fall upon the last mannequin. It lights up white in the glow, and we exchange a look. The shadow gets closer, and we make the choice. We follow the tunnel to the right. I stare into the eyes of the mannequin as we pass it by, and the mannequin is just staring sadly back at us. My lungs are on fire, my legs burn with the effort, and at this point I'm struggling to keep going, let alone in a straight line. But I risk one final glance back as we leave the figures behind. I watch the shadow come to a stop, and it bursts and spreads up and out towards the wall, screaming, a dark and billowing stain beyond the illuminated white glow of the low mannequin. Round the corner we race, and the entrance, at last, becomes visible. We haven't been back to the cave, and Lexi has not came back. The guilt that I have for leaving her behind will likely stay with me for the rest of my life. What were we supposed to do? What would you have done? We told the police our story, as unbelievable as it was. They were freaked out though. They have gone to check the place out. They found the scratchings of the initials on the wall, and the alcohol and the equipment we left behind. But no mannequins, no sign of any monster, no sign of Lexi. The tunnel does go much deeper than anyone had anticipated, and they did call off the search for now, as we wait for the arrival of a team of dedicated mountain and caving experts. But I still see them in my dreams. The mannequins. I wonder about their purpose, about where they came from. That last one especially, and all I can see when I try to get to sleep at night is the eyes of that mannequin staring sadly back into mine, a beautiful bright and glittering green. What do you know about the Ouija board? I call it the spirit board, and I don't mean that in a good way. I haven't even touched one. I even refuse to be in the same building where there's one. If I go to a place and there is one, I won't even go inside. Why? It's basically a doorway for evil spirits. One night I was hanging out with a couple of friends, and we were all going to spend the night there. We were drinking, laughing, just having fun at one of the guys' house. One of the girls randomly pulls out a board and says, "Why don't we play this?" Everyone jumped on the idea, almost like their grandma never told them not to play with this. I wasn't excited. The second that I saw that board, I told them no. I refused to. I even told them they were stupid if they even thought about touching it. They all laughed at me, called me a chicken, teased me for not wanting to join. I didn't care. I walked away from them, and I went into one of the rooms. I turned the lights out, and I laid on the bed and listened to music on my headphones. I'm not even sure whose room it was, but hey, excuse my party days back then. I think about maybe 20 minutes later. I say this because I know 5 songs played through. I swear, I heard somebody in the room with me. My eyes shot open. I took my headphones out, and I was like, "Who's there?" No one answered. I sat there for a second. I was telling myself I was just imagining things. So I put my headphones back on, but this time I didn't play anything, just to see if I could hear the noise again. I did. There was movement in the dark, but like in a closet or something that was across from the bed. I shouted at whoever was in the room with me to cut it out. Remember, it was dark. Still no answer. I thought it was just one of my friends trying to mess with me, so I rolled over and told myself, whatever. That's when it happened. All of a sudden, it felt like somebody was walking on the bed. That's when I started screaming, terrified, and within seconds, my friends came running into the room. One of the guys slammed the door open, and as soon as he did, the walking or movement or whatever it was stopped. He turned on the light, asking what was going on. I started to explain that somebody was in here messing with me. He looked in the closet, underneath the bed. By this time, the rest of my friends had came into the room as well. Nobody found anything. After this whole thing, I went back into the living room with them, but nobody was playing with that stupid board again. I thought the whole time they had stopped playing because they believed me. They even said that they weren't gonna play no more. But, come to find out, the next day, one of my friends called me. She said that we were all gonna get smudged because, well, she didn't tell me exactly the details, but they also experienced some things while playing. As I was in the bedroom, she just told me that they had also seen something. Now you know. Don't bring those things around me. Do you know about duendes? They're basically little people. Some people call them elves. They can be good or bad. The bad ones are said to draw kids away, and the good ones will play pranks on you. I heard so many different things like they are the spirits of kids who are stuck in purgatory. They hide in the shadows, and they're extremely sneaky. Now duendes aren't as popular. La lechuza, nahuales, or los que caminan en cuatro, aka skinwalkers. I have talked to many people who have claimed to have seen a lechuza, as in the owl witch, including my grandparents who are very serious about this, the owl witch lady. A lechuza is definitely well rooted in our culture. It's pretty much a witch who can take the form of a woman or a giant owl. People claim that they heard a lechuza walking on their roof, or it will follow them around in the form of an owl. Anyways, this happened when I was 13 or 14, which was actually one of the last times that I went. My auntie lived very close to a mountain near Oaxaca. Perfect setting, huh? Well, her husband, my uncle, he was a pretty wealthy guy. He sold and bred livestock. He had a lot of horses, cattle, goats, and dogs. Their house was a pretty big place with lots of land for the animals. Of course, their house was very isolated. The closest town was pretty far away. So we went there one year to stay with her, and everything was normal, at least the first few days. When the weird shit started happening, it started one early in the morning. I like to wear watches, and I take it off before going to bed, and then I put it back on after I brush my teeth and whatnot. I remember waking up, grabbing my watch and putting it on top of this shelf outside the bathroom. I brushed my teeth, and when I come back, it's gone. I thought for a second and looked around the shelf, and even under, but I didn't find it. I went back to the room I was staying in and looked around. I thought that maybe one of my siblings were playing with me. I looked around and all three of my siblings were sleeping on the floor. That's when I started getting a bit worried, but not really scared. I go to look around the shelf more, and I still couldn't find it. I remember saying out loud, "Whoever took my watch, please give it back to me," and then walk away to put my shoes on. And from the living room, I started to hear this very low noise. It was my alarm on my watch going off. I peeked my head into the hallway, and I could see the blue light from my watch. Now this is when I get scared. I walk up to it, I put it on, and I just get this uneasy feeling. I then go to watch TV, and then I see my auntie walking into the kitchen, and then I say good morning, and I ask her if she grabbed my watch. She says no, but she tells me not to leave valuables in the open. I ask why, and she then says, "Los duendes will come and take them, and if you aren't careful, they might take you." I give an uncomfortable laugh, and I'm like, right. She obviously saw that I thought she was crazy. She then told me she was serious, and that most likely the duende grabbed my watch. In my mind, I'm like, this lady is crazy. Later on that day, I asked my mom if duendes are real. She gave me a concerned look and asked why. I told her that my auntie said that there were duendes in her house. She just steered away from the question and was like, "If you ever feel scared, just pray." I didn't think too much about it after that. The day went by, and nothing really happened. I remember watching the movie in the living room, Then I fell asleep on the couch right there. I remember waking up to a sound coming from the kitchen, and what sounded like footsteps running from the kitchen. The footsteps were light, but still audible. It sounded like when a cat runs. I then see the lights turn on from the hallway, and I see my auntie running towards the kitchen. I then hear her say, "Ay, esos pinches duendes," which means, "Those fucking elves." I slowly get up and peek in the kitchen, and it's a huge mess. Most of it is food. I ask her if an animal got in. She's aggravated at the mess and just says, "Eran dos duendes." I roll my eyes and look at my watch. It was almost 4 in the morning. I decided to help her clean up. We then finished cleaning up in about 20 minutes, and when I help her with the dustpan, it was one of those where you have to crouch over to hold it. Well, when I do that, I look to the huge pile of food, and I can see what seems like sugar or flour, and there's little tiny footprints, not like baby footprints, but smaller. I look at my auntie and she knows that I saw them. She's then like, "I told you." I'm still not completely convinced, so I finish helping her, and then after that I just go to bed. Nothing happened for a few days. The last experience I had with these things was when I was sleeping and for some reason woke up. No reason at all. I remember feeling uneasy and hearing those footsteps again, as something small was running in front of the bed. I sit up fast and see a small shadow. It's running weird, but it was moving fast. All this happened in a matter of seconds. I turn on the lights and nothing's there. I couldn't make out the shadow, but it was small, maybe like a foot tall. That's when I started believing in all this shit. I was so uneasy after that, and I was glad to go back home. Another thing that I always heard was that duendes are the spirits of dead children that were not baptized. My family always blamed bad things happening on los duendes. Lost keys, dogs going nuts, chickens acting up. The other day I couldn't find my pocket knife. I always carry it clipped on my right pocket. I asked my dad in case I left it at their house. A few days later I go to my parents and I ask him again. And he's all like, "Son los duendes." Like, imagine that. You turn around and there's a little person behind you looking up at you. Don't leave valuables out in the open. I have only shared this with a few people, and still, when I think about it, it just freaks me out. And growing up in a small town, exploring it in the hills was the thing to do. This incident took place at the north end of Ruby Valley in Elko County, Nevada. Someday I will play around on Google Maps to try to find this place, but it's slightly on the north road of Highway 93 that goes into the Ruby Valley. I have always liked checking out old mine shafts and ghost towns. That stuff really intrigues me. At the Burger Bar in Wells, Nevada, where I am from and where I grew up, they had these old turn-of-the-century maps under glass on the tables, and one of them showed several ghost towns just north of Ruby Valley. So I figured I would go check them out, as I had not been in the area very often. I gassed up my '72 Dodge pickup and grabbed my HK91 and I set out. I had found some old foundations in the lower country and started heading into the mountains themselves, and I started finding some old abandoned mine shafts. It was pretty cool, to be honest, so I kept going up. I took this old road that was no more than an overgrown cattle path at this point in history, and I came upon a tree blocking the road. It was an old pine, about 2 feet in diameter, and it was blocking the road. After this tree and the road continued straight for about 200 yards, and then it hooked right before coming back again 180 degrees. I parked my truck in front of the tree, and I started to set out on foot. I grabbed my HK with one 20-round magazine in the rifle, and I put a 20-round mag in my back left pocket. I always had a rifle with me, as I have encountered a lot of mountain lions and mine shafts before, and just generally, I like to shoot targets and stuff. So I get up on the ridge lines and I'm shooting at this big boulder from a couple hundred yards away. As soon as I climbed down over the fallen tree, I had this really creepy feeling as if somebody was watching me. I continue on for 200 yards, to the point where the road started curving right and gaining elevation. And when it did, it was going towards this cabin that was up the hill. At this point, I realized that not only did I feel like somebody was watching me, it was also really quiet. This was in June or so. School had just got out. Everywhere you went, you could hear those old cicadas, but not out here. It seemed like as soon as I crossed the fallen tree, the mountains became silent. No bugs or birds, nothing, just deafening silence. As I came up to the turn, there was this big rock. The thing had to be about 15 feet in diameter. You could tell that it used to be on the road, but because of years of erosion and all that stuff, it had slid down just slightly off the road. It seemed to be red limestone, I think, or something like that. It stood out since they are not quite that common in this area. I looked at the rock, and you could tell that there were some carvings in it at some point in time. But again, because of weathering, whatever was carved in it had been worn off. I kept walking up the road. I was really creeped out, but I really wanted to check out that old cabin up there, as it was pretty obvious that no one had been there in a long time. At this point, I was maybe 3 hours off road to get to this point. Eventually, I did get up to the cabin. As far as abandoned houses and cabins in Nevada go, this one was actually in pretty good shape. All of the glass on the windows was still intact, and there was some evidence of curtains behind the windows. By this point, there was something in the back of my mind telling me that I should keep on going. I went into the cabin, and that's where I started to get the feeling that something was off again. Most cabins you find out in the middle of nowhere in Nevada are empty. There's nothing really left in them. Maybe a bit of broken chairs and couches and stuff. But this one was completely furnished. Time had taken its toll, but everything was still there. What was left of an old mattress and some bedding was still there as well. There were plates and other cookware throughout the house, along with these tattered clothing and personal artifacts such as a chest and faded pictures. And what really creeped me out was at the dinner table. It was still set for people. Dinner plates, glasses, and silverware. This was the first cabin that I have ever found that was in this condition. It was as if whoever resided here had just got up and left and chose to leave everything behind. I felt like I shouldn't be in the cabin, and I went outside to see if I could find a mine shaft or anything else. Once I was out the door, I decided to chamber around into my HK. The sound of me rocking around echoed throughout the canyon and broke the eerie silence. As little of a thing as it was, this actually helped calm my nerves down a bit. And now, directly behind the cabin, was a well. It was still intact. As I got closer, it sounded like there was some noise coming from it, like a slight breeze rustling through it or something. When I got about 30 feet of this, I started to smell something, and it smelled pretty bad, putrid almost. And I figured there was definitely some animal that had died in the well. The smell of something decaying was heavy in the air with this other scent that I couldn't identify that tore my nostrils. I didn't want to get any closer to the well, and I started leaning towards the left where I could see the opening to a mine shaft up on the hill. The closer I got to it, I could feel the breeze coming out of it. This is not really uncommon if you explore mine shafts before, as the breeze could be coming in from another opening in the mine. But the thing was, it was perfectly calm. As far as I could see, there were no trees moving or any signs of the wind. The closer I got to the opening of the mine shaft, the more of a feeling of that dread and being watched I got. I got within 15 feet of the shaft when the smell hit me again. That same smell of decay, but it was much stronger than the well. Right then, all of my spidey senses started going off. I knew it was time to get out of there. I started turning left to book it out of there when I saw a dark shadow moving in the opening of the mine shaft. Whatever it was, it appeared to be crouched down to fit into the mine shaft, as most that I have seen are about 8 to 10 foot ceilings. At first I thought it was a mountain lion, but then I remember how big these mine shafts were. My mind raced trying to process and think of what the hell this was. It was too big to be a black bear, which are also rare in northeastern Nevada. I nearly froze with panic, and it slowly kept coming towards the opening of the mine shaft. It was maybe within 10 feet of the opening, and the light was starting to show just whatever this was. It was covered, from head to toe, in grayish brown fur. Then, it screamed at me. It was unlike anything I ever heard in my entire life. My ears were ringing. I flipped into panic mode and I did what any good person would do. I started shooting at it. I pulled up my HK, placed the front blade on what appeared to be its center of mass, and ripped off 5 rounds as fast as I could. If you ever shot a big game with a large caliber rifle, you know the sound when you connect with something. I had 4 solid hits and 1 round that went just a little too high. Then it made the scream even louder than it had before in pain. At this time, I started hearing more and separate screams coming from all over the well and from the hills above the mine shaft. That's when I started running down the hill as fast as I could. And the tree line above the road, about 75 to 125 yards, I could see fast movement. The rocks were tumbling down the hill, and there were several other screams from the mine shaft. Whatever it was, I had definitely connected, and it was hurting. But whatever was up in the tree line, they were running from tree to tree on all 4s, getting closer to me. As I ran towards the rock, I was shooting in the general vicinity of the movement on top of the hill. By the time I got to the limestone rock, I had expended a 20-round mag. I ripped it out and put my spare mag in and chamber around, and I started running towards the fallen tree, about 200 yards away by now. I kept looking back, and whatever they were staying in the trees. I could make out their masses and fur, but they wouldn't stay in the open. I got back to the fallen tree, and I fell in the dirt trying to jump over it. I got up off my ass, and I fired between 12 and 15 rounds at the closest movement, which was about 50 yards away from me now. I heard a few rounds connect, and I started screaming. Between the screaming and the gunshots, my ears were damn near deaf. I opened the door of my truck and I started the fucking thing as fast as I could, backing up to turn around. I damn near put my truck down in the canyon, and as I started to leave on the road that I had came in, that's when I finally got to look at one of them. It was crouched over with its front feet on the tree. It was covered head to toe in grayish brownish fur, and had long slender fingers with claws tipping them off. The back of it was hunched over, and the face was slender, almost looking like that of a badger but with more sunken eyes. It was shaking its head back and forth, and it sounded like he was attempting to yell at me again, or speak, or something. It was the scariest scream ever. But with the noise of my truck, I could not make out just what the hell it was, or what the hell it was trying to do, or say. I averaged about 50 to 60 miles per hour on a shitty dirt road that I had done 15 on the way up, but I didn't slow down until I got back to the pavement. By now, I was so shaken that I had to stop and collect myself. I got back to town, and I was in a bit of shock. My dad was basically an expert in the Ruby Mountains for about 20 years. He asked me how my trip went. He could tell I was startled and asked where I had been. I told him that I had been north of Ruby Valley, and he got quiet and asked if I had seen a cabin with a fallen tree over the road. I told him yes. He looked me in the eyes and told me that it's somewhere that I should never, ever go again, especially by myself. He wouldn't speak about it after that, and to honor that, I have never been back there. It's part of the reason why I live in the west side of Nevada now. But in the back of my mind, there was something telling me that I should go back, and maybe one day, I will go back. This was back in 2001, before camera phones. I was too broke to afford a digital camera, so I want to go back with the camera, maybe a GoPro on my helmet, and with several friends that have rifles. Just something about there, even with the shit that I experience, is actually drawing me back. One day I will go back. I'll draw a sketch. My drawing skills are really shitty, so this is just gonna be a rough sketch. And I did try researching it, but this was a few years ago. I was asking some old timers and one of them told me a story about the rubies. I'll say it really quickly. During the 40s and 50s, the US Army was operating out of the Wendover Air Base. Every now and then, during fucked up weather, a B-25, B-17, or a B-29 would smack the rubies because of poor visibility. Some of the local ranchers got recruited to help the military go up to a crash site during the winter to recover the bodies. The rancher that I was talking to told me that it took them around 3 days to get up to where this crash was. He said that when they got to the wreckage, all of the crew members were laid out side by side, next to each other, in a clearing in the wreckage. Many of them were missing arms and legs, and it was obvious that all of them died on impact somehow. Keep in mind that this was about 10,000 feet above sea level, and the bodies were laying next to each other. Did you know that the flute was a traditional instrument that the natives first used when they first settled in? It's said that the skinwalker uses the flute to communicate with the spirits in other planes or dimensions. I was working on a ranch in Chinle one summer. It was a fairly big spread, a couple hundred acres at least. We had been having problems with coyotes getting into the sheep pens at night. The guy that I was working for, Dwayne, sent me and his middle son, he was about 17, out to make sure the gate on the corral at the southern end of the property was closed. The younger boy, he was maybe 11, wanted to come with us as well, so we let him jump in the back of the Jeep. It was after dark. The drive out there was a good 10 or 15 minutes. Dwayne's kid was behind the wheel. I was sitting in the passenger seat, my head back and my eyes half closed, just enjoying the cool night air and the quietness. When we got there, Dwayne's kid, his name was Jay, sent his little brother, Aaron, out to check the gate. It was only 20 or so yards off the road and to the far side of some posts with chicken wire. My eyes were still kind of closed when I heard some whistling, but it wasn't like a person. It was more like the sound of a flute, the reed kind with the holes punched through it. It was a simple tune, but it was deep. That's when out of nowhere, Jay starts yelling for Aaron to get back in the Jeep. And it's like he's not kidding. Just the way he was yelling, basically screaming at him, caused me to jump up, and it had my heart racing, as if something bad was about to happen. He kept asking me, his voice in near panic, "Do you hear that?" Sounds like some kind of flute," I said. Just at that moment, Aaron launches himself into the back of the Jeep, his eyes wide open and looking as if he is ready to cry. Jay turns the key, and practically before the engine turns on, he's got his weight on the gas pedal like he's afraid it's going to push back. The wheel starts spinning. Dirt and pebbles are flying all over the place. No sooner does Jay get us in motion when the sound of this flute is right there, as if whoever is playing it is just there in the dark. But I couldn't see a damn thing. As soon as we get back to the ranch house, the two boys run in and tell Dwayne what happened. The next day he goes into the settlement and comes back with a medicine man. The old guy spends more than half the day going around and blessing every part of the ranch. When he leaves, he tells us to be careful and to not go out alone at night. He said he is sure that there's a skinwalker going around. This doesn't have any off the charts action like some stories you might hear, but this is something that did make me reconsider living in the remote areas. I went camping with two of my buddies about 7 years back. We were backpacking out in the deep woods of Montana. Every day we would wake up, hike until about noon, and then find a place to camp for the night, and spend the rest of the daylight hours fishing or shooting cans with a BB gun. All of us actually had real guns, but as you know, ammo isn't cheap, and we wanted them only for emergencies. We had a great first few days. On the fourth day, we must have been about 50 miles from the nearest road. We decided that this would be as far as we go, and tomorrow we would head back the way we came. We were pretty high up on a hill at this point, and we had a lovely view of the landscape. We found what seemed to be the concrete foundation of a long since demolished fire watch station, and decided that it would be the perfect place to camp. We made a fire, and then we went to sleep. It was still pretty early, but we were all tired as hell. Later that night, I woke up to go pee. I walked out to the edge of the concrete platform, and it was basically pitch black outside. The stars were beautiful though. I remember pointing my flashlight down the hill the way we came, because I didn't want to point it at the tents and wake up my friends. The flashlight was pretty weak, one of those real heavy ones with a dark yellow light that only lights up about 30 feet in front of you. I could barely make out what I thought was a deer moving across the path that we took up the hill, but it was too far for my flashlight to really hit it, and there were about a dozen trees in the way, so I only saw a few flashes of it. After a few seconds, I saw that it was actually not a deer. It was a person, and I started to freak out because I assumed it was a ranger that was about to give us hell for having a fire without a permit. Every time I looked back, this person was a couple feet closer to me, and I could hear them taking slow steps whenever I looked down, attempting to control my stream. I didn't realize it at this time how strange it would be for a ranger to be wandering around here without a flashlight at 2 in the morning, but I was tired. I could only still barely make out the rough shape of him within the darkness with my really crappy flashlight, but I finished up my business and then pointed the flashlight back at the person. He wasn't moving towards us anymore. I yelled out to them and asked if they needed something, but I got no response. At this point, my buddies were awake, and they came out of their tents to see what was going on. One of them had a much more powerful flashlight than I did, and he pointed it to where I was pointing mine. It lit up the person, and we could see him pretty clearly now. He was tall, but fairly lanky, and about 6.5 feet tall. And something was indeed wrong with this person. They had sideways facial features. They weren't bloody or anything. It's not like he was attacked by a bear and it just rearranged his face, but his eyes were just sideways, and the mouth was also sideways. He was staring directly at us and starting to smile pretty hard, even though I'm not sure if I would actually consider it smiling, because it basically was just baring its teeth at us and maintaining eye contact. It was still pretty far away, maybe about 100 feet, but we could still see its face pretty clearly. Its eyes were wide, open enough for us to see the whites. We were all pretty shocked, obviously, and one of my buddies pointed his gun at him. As soon as this thing saw the gun, it just sort of coughed or gurgled. It sounded kind of like when someone is choking. It turned around but kept looking at us over its shoulder as it moved back the way it came from. It wasn't making any sort of effort to stay hidden, and with the bright light from my buddy, we watched it walk off into the woods for about 10 minutes until we couldn't see it anymore. All of us were freaking out, and we quickly packed up our camp and let the fire die down. But that was the scariest part, to be honest. Not seeing this thing first, but packing up the camp basically in the dark, because we couldn't hold our flashlights and look at the woods around us. In the meantime, we heard plenty of noises, and the entire time we felt like this thing was going to sprint out of the darkness. But it never did. We had our rifles out until daylight. Then we hiked faster than I ever hiked, and we got out of the woods. We hiked so fast that we were out by noon, We threw our stuff into the truck and drove 90 miles per hour, checking the mirrors every 10 seconds. We never saw that thing again. Once we were back in town, we all recounted exactly what we had all seen to each other, and our descriptions of this thing's face were all exactly the same. Very wide eyes, sideways features. It never attacked us. The woods didn't fall silent. This thing didn't smell like its flesh was rotting. It was just strange, bizarre. It looked wrong, and it also moved wrong. And the scariest part was when we couldn't see it at all, because we didn't know if it was going to be right next to us. And we didn't need to fire any warning shots, even though we were all thinking about doing it. As soon as it saw the gun, it started backing away. Maybe other people or other campers had fired at it before, and it understood what it was. But that's also scary, because that means it's actually quite intelligent. We were trying for hours to rationalize it, but none of us could really figure out why somebody would be out in the middle of the woods with no flashlight or backpack, stalking some random hikers in the middle of the night. None of us think that it was a human, but we also got no explanation. It's basically a campfire story for us at this point. We still go camping here and there, and I had some other weird stuff happen as well. But this is just about this specific case. But nowadays we stick to actual campsites, and we invite more friends than before. Backpacking alone is out of the question for me. English is not my first language, but I want to tell you about my encounter with the goat walker. I was camping in North Minnesota. It was early winter, which is tame in comparison to my home. I'm with my stepbrother, my stepfather, and Alaska. Alaska is an old dog that I've been having since I was just 5 years old. The day is normal. Alaska is quiet. My stepbrother is loud, and we go fishing. We start the fire and cook. At some point during this, I realize that we don't have any water. My stepfather tells me to go get some water, that there are some wells a mile or two down the trail. So my stepbrother, myself, and my dog Alaska are walking down the trail in the dark. We're far from any town, so the night is very dark, but the sky is looking really beautiful. So anyways, my stepbrother is spoiled. We're about 100 meters from the camp, and he starts saying that he's really tired. So I tell him to just go back. He takes the flashlight and storms off. From here, it's just me and Alaska, old friends from home. A few minutes as we continue walking, we start to hear this weird noise. We think it's an animal. It's not abnormal hearing animals in North Minnesota, obviously, but it seemed to be the wrong animal for these woods. It sounded like there was gravel scraping, and my dog is very nervous, which is pretty strange. My dog is strong-minded, so I get kind of worried too. He doesn't always act like this, as he starts to yip and snarl. Now I figure this must be a weird animal because the dog knows animals well, and also knows their smells. We're also outdoors a lot, so this makes me a little bit more bothered. The rest of the walk is pretty silent, but Alaska keeps stopping and looking back down the trail. I begin to think that my stepbrother is playing tricks on us, but I'm too impatient to play around. So I finally get to the well, and I'm pumping the old lever, and it's making that creaking sound that they do. But then, in the woods I hear a sound like an injured animal. I'm very uneasy now. My dog is now hiding behind me, and this dog is normally super brave, and likes to stand in front and guard me. But this time Alaska is too afraid. So I quickly fill up the jugs and I'm ready to go back. It's very hard to see in the dark because my stepbrother took the flashlight, so all I can use is the light from the sky. It's also very difficult to carry that many jugs of water with only so many hands. As I'm walking, Alaska begins to snarl and whine all over again. But this time, I can now see a figure on the trail ahead. It's not moving, it's just staring into the woods. It's obviously human, but I know Alaska would be eager to meet a stranger. It loves people, So I cough pretty loud so that the figure can hear. And that's when this person speaks. "Oh, you were passing by me earlier, and I didn't see or hear anyone." I stand there for a second, weary because again, I'm sure there was nobody on the trail. I can hear my dog breathing. Then, this weird sound comes from the man. I know this wasn't smart of me, but I decide to ask him where he's staying. And he says, "Oh, I have a tent. It's only a couple of sites from yours." I stand there again, not sure what to say. Then the water sloshes around in the jugs, and the man offers help to carry them. I actually agree, but as he starts walking over to me, there's another weird noise. And Alaska starts barking at this person when he comes over and takes the jug. He's really rough with it, and I also notice that he's all dirty. Like his hands look like he was digging in the mud or something. But I do say thank you, and he says, "Oh, not a problem," and that he's always eager to give help. My dog, on the other hand, is now standing on the other side of me, sniffing the air, and then I notice that it kind of smells like a farm. I don't want to be rude, so I don't ask questions. And I can actually see the campfire light through the trees, so I know we're not that far away. But as we're walking, there's a sudden feeling of anxiety that's overtaking me. I have this desire to tell the man that he doesn't have to come all the way back to camp, and I don't know why I'm having this issue. I never have any problems talking with my family, my boss, or girls, but I can't bring myself to look sideways at this man. But I have the feeling that something is insanely wrong with him. The fire was close enough now to throw a shadow, but I can't see anybody's face, and there's no talking. There's only sound from the fire. I still have this overwhelming fear. It's like the metal from the water, and then the farm smell. It's burning my nostrils. And then I realize that it reminds me of a time when my dad cut himself in the big barn. The smell of it all, and that much blood. I'm still afraid of blood, and I'm just very ill from that memory. That's when I finally turn to look at the man, and I see that his eyes are white all over. I'm taken aback as I yell, and then there's the animal sound again, and my dog barks. The man says, "Why are you screaming?" And he sounds actually afraid. And that's when I realize that he's actually blind. I confess and say that I don't think that he's actually blind, and he just gives this weird creepy laugh and says not to worry about it. And then I hear the animal sound again. But by now, we're in full firelight, and it keeps looking like there's a weird animal just standing behind the man. It's like when you see those videos where there's a spirit that's attached to a person, and it looks like it's almost inside of them or something. And that's when I say, "What's that behind you?" And he says, "Oh, don't worry about that." And that's when I realize that there's something really weird going on. The man then laughs to break the silence, and he hands me the water jug. And that's when he says that he has to go, and just doesn't say anything else. And he kind of hobbles off with this weird gait, off into the woods. A few minutes later, my stepfather and my stepbrother come back from the trees, as they had both gone to use the bathroom. That's the end of my story. I did the best that I could. I thought it was worth it. I know the English was very, very bad in it, and I most likely messed up on some words. So I tried to fix it the best I could to get the point across. So I hope you still enjoyed it. I'm not sure who this man was, or even if he was a man. Maybe he was the devil, helping me out. Maybe. I'm not sure. But I know that image of his face still haunts me to this day. So this is not that scary or weird as some other stuff that you might see or hear. But it happened back around in 2010 when I went to Montana with my dad. I think I was about 13 or 14, around there. Anyways, this is some crazy stuff that happened to me. So we were in the middle of the Rocky Mountains in Montana, to be exact, I was with my dad on a trip cross country. We stopped in the national park for a few days. It was a random small town, so we park at this local super cool campground that has a lake nearby where I can go jump off the rocks and into the lake. I know it's gonna sound strange, and now that I think about it, it really was bad of my dad to do this. He would leave me here while he went to the bar. I mean, I was pretty mature, I want to say, at that age. But still, who leaves their son alone while they go get their fix, right? So while I'm swimming and playing around in the lake, this dude, I know, don't talk to strangers, but I mean, I wasn't a little kid no more. But there was this older guy. He looked Native American, and he looked to be about 60 or 70. And he walks up to me, and he just tells me that there are things in this area that belong to the Blackfoot tribe. Something about the guardians of these lands. He spoke of artifacts left behind by his ancestors, relics about legends. He then looked at me in the eyes, and in a stern tone, said, "Do not disturb these sacred objects. If you see them, don't pick them up, and do not touch them. There are beads on the ground that show the history, necklaces with the spirits of our ancestors, shoes that walk the roads that we now take, and drawings that capture the history of us. Each item is a thread of Blackfoot culture. Respect it and honor it." And that was it. He simply walked away. Yeah, very weird, I know. So my dad eventually came back, a bit drunk, but to be honest, that's when he was more friendly. So as the days went by, we went hiking a bit, and as we were walking, I came across some black stones that were sticking out of the ground a bit. I picked a few of them up because they looked very shiny and polished. I mean, where else do you see totally black meaty rocks? Pebbles almost, right? Anyways, yeah, I fucked up, but let me finish telling you what happened. We got back to the campground and went back inside the RV to sleep. Now at night is when the crazy shit started happening. As I was in bed, I heard this sound. It was like this crying that could be heard from the campground outside, but it didn't sound human whatsoever. It sounded like, I don't know, I can't even describe it. The kind of sounds that make the hair on your neck stand up. I'm not sure what to do, but I get even more scared when I hear footsteps walking up to the RV. I don't quite remember, but whoever is outside is breathing really heavy. It kind of sounds like a bear. Being curious and scared, I look out the window, but I don't see anything. But I know there's somebody outside because you can hear them walking. I can hear them breathing, but there's nothing out there. I end up going back to bed and eventually fall asleep. But the next morning when I wake up, we find out that a fisherman has been found dead around the lake, which is the exact lake we were staying at. I have no idea how he died, but I remember the noises from last night, and I couldn't help but put two and two together. My dad then drove into town outside of this park. We were getting ready to head through the Midwest, and we ended up stopping at this Native American museum. As we walk inside, I noticed it was run by this really old woman. We explored around a bit, and my dad told me to keep my hands inside my pockets at all times. At some point, my dad walks up to the counter to purchase some souvenirs. As I'm looking around, I take my hands out of my pockets, and one of the black rocks I collected while hiking drops out. This woman sees this, and I kid you not, she completely loses her mind. She tells me that I should never pick those up again, and that I don't know what I'm doing, that I have brought a curse upon myself. So me and my dad just look at her crazy, and we're both a little freaked out. So we just kind of walk out. By this point, we're thinking that the whole town is just full of weird people, as my dad continues driving further out. Later on that evening, we stop at a diner. As we walk in, that's when I notice him. That same native man that had talked to me at the lake. He was just standing in the corner of the diner, just staring, creepy as hell. At some point between us walking in and getting our meal, he disappears. Now there was no back door to this diner, and he was gonna have to walk by us in order for him to get out. I don't know if it's related to all the creepy shit that's going on. But later on that night, when we're sleeping in the RV again, I don't hear anything no more, as we're pretty much further out from the national park and that creepy ass town. I noticed and remember that I start having these weird dreams that I can't comprehend. But I know it's about a woman that is yelling at me, telling me that I shouldn't have disturbed them. I wake up, and mind you, we're so far away from the park now. I know we're like hours basically, but that's when I hear them again. Those crying sounds. They're back. This time, when I hear those terrible noises outside, the footsteps and the heavy breathing, I look outside the window, and I see this thing, just staring at me. I can only describe it as everything demonic. Everything about it was just wrong and just felt very evil. I closed the blinds and I lay there sleepless from that night on. I would have gone to wake up my father, but I know he would have told me to stop being a little wuss and go back to bed. I didn't sleep at all that night. As I'm laying there in bed underneath my covers, trying to ignore all the sounds outside, I start hearing taps on my window. I'm not sure what else happened, as I know I eventually fell asleep. But the next morning, we finally get out of Montana, and that's when I noticed that the dreams finally stopped. No sounds, no dreams, no more weird people, nothing. However, recently, I went back to Montana with my uncle about a year ago, and I kid you not, the exact same thing starts up again every night. The crying, the wailing, the sounds. I didn't see anything this time though, but still, the same dreams about this woman yelling at me. I did try to go back to the museum to find the lady I saw the first time around, but apparently, she was dead. Now, I have no idea where the guy was. The guy that gave me the warning at the lake. Even after I went to the diner, he wasn't there. So I ended up talking to one of the workers at the diner, and when I asked him about that guy, his eyes grew wide and said, "Those who see him means that they, who shall not be named, are near." Creepy as fuck, right? Well, to follow up, he said that I need to leave Montana and get a full cleansing, and to never pick up anything from the woods again. We did leave Montana, and everything stopped again. I never did go get that cleansing, but I would advise, if you go hiking, camping, backpacking, or whatever in the woods, never touch or pick anything you find. We had a tradition of going to see my grandfather every summer and spend some time at his cabin. The cabin by a lake, and older than he is. The cabin is a load of fun for a child spending their carefree summer. The one thing I disliked about the cabin was there was no indoor washroom. A shower was set up outside. An outhouse a few steps off into the woods was the worst thing about the cabin. I hated using that thing. Bugs always took over the inside, and I had a fear of something reaching up to grab me if I sat down. We begged my grandfather to get indoor plumbing. He only got a tub hooked up, but his water heater can only handle so much, so we were banned from using it in the summer. The place was just barely held together. It would be cheaper to buy a new cabin than to renovate it, but we still went every year, always forgetting the negatives, until we finally arrived. Even my father complained about the outhouse, and he never really complained about anything. My grandfather also had a rack of hunting rifles and one shotgun. He told all of us to never touch them, and to respect the weapons. He left the cabinet they were inside locked, his guns unloaded, and the ammo hidden somewhere in the cabin. He took no chances with the guns around a bunch of kids. He always said he would whoop some ass if he ever saw us touching them, and told us it was because he loved us and didn't want an accident to happen. I asked why he kept the guns. I didn't see him using them very often aside from shooting a deer or two. I would see him go off into the woods while we swam with a rifle on his shoulder, but he normally never came back with some animal he shot. I don't think he would kill something to waste, leaving it behind. Or did I think he was a bad shot? He may walk slowly, but his eyesight was better than ours. He always knew what might be going on. One time, my cousin found a cigarette someone dropped near the corner store, where we sometimes got ice cream snacks. He kept it hidden for a day. When he thought that the coast was clear, he used one of the lighters for the fire pit. He didn't even take a drag before our grandfather came out yelling at him, scaring us all to death. With 3 kids crying, begging him not to tell our parents, he gave us mercy. As long as we cleaned the boat we've been putting off all weekend. Overall, my grandfather was a scary man. One night, after telling each other ghost stories to freak each other out, the worst thing happened. When everyone else was dead asleep, I needed to use the restroom. I hated going out at night. It might be only a few steps, and yet it felt like a mile walk. Things croaked off in the woods, which were perfectly normal noises for a forest. When you're a kid, full of ghost stories and listening to these things, those noises turned into killers and ghosts waiting to scoop you up. I went through the cabin to the back door, knowing that I couldn't hold it until morning. There was a flashlight by the door. I turned it on only to have it flicker off. It was the kid's job to make sure the flashlight had new batteries. Sometimes we switched them to out the good ones in the shared Game Boy for a few more hours of playtime. It finally came back to bite us. However, since the full moon was out, I had taken the path 100 times before, so I went on without the flashlight. I feared what my grandfather would do if I woke him up trying to find new batteries. Slipping on my shoes, I went off in the backyard and down the short path to use the washroom. I heard a noise, and I looked over my shoulder and walked faster, fearing what might be looking at me in the dark. That was a mistake. Going without a flashlight and not paying attention to where I was going could have killed me that night. The longer I walked, the more afraid I was. It should not take this long to get to the outhouse. Another crack of a twig made me jump. I could no longer hold it and needed to step off the path to do my business and carry on. I hated going to the washroom out in the woods. At least it was quick, and I was back on the path towards the cabin. But was I? Nothing looked right. The trail appeared too overgrown. I didn't understand how I had gone so far off the path. In my mind, I went the right way the entire time, and I only got lost when I stepped aside. Fear nearly froze me to the spot, forcing my body to move. I started going down where I thought I had came from, praying to find the path again. At this point, I called out for someone to come and get me. A sound came, and I shut my mouth. Heart beating so fast that it hurt. I looked around trying to see what was stalking a poor scared kid in the dark. Something flew at me. Wings flapping and a screeching cry made me snap. That's when I ran, screaming, trying to get away from whatever this thing was. Only when I stopped running and was very lost, I realized I just got scared by a bat. Just a normal, harmless bat. I wanted to cry. Unless someone noticed I wasn't in my sleeping bag when they woke up to go to the bathroom as well. No one would know I was missing until morning. How long would it take until someone did notice? I skipped breakfast pretty often. They might even assume I was just sleeping in. I didn't want to stay out in the woods overnight. Having no other options or ideas of what to do while lost, I kept walking while trying to force back my tears. I had forgot it was best to stay in one spot while being lost in the woods. Just going deeper in them wasn't the best idea. I felt cold, scared, and was getting bit by bugs. My heart almost broke over the idea of being out there forever, starving to death, and no one ever knowing what happened. Thinking back to the books I needed to read in school, I wonder if I could live out in the woods until they found me. If I find clean water and could figure out how to make a fire, I might be able to. The issue being, I never actually started a fire without a lighter. I tried with sticks, but it always took too long, and we always gave up. Me and my cousins loved burning things and were impatient. There was always a lighter to use. I wanted to try and find the cabin until the sun rose. If I still was in the woods by tomorrow night, I would buckle down to figure out how to make fire. Wait, wouldn't someone smell the smoke and find me sooner? Or would I burn the entire forest down? Getting motivated, I started to look for a clearing that I could use for a fire pit. It took a while, but I found a spot where the ground looked to be mostly dirt. It took longer to find a stone I could use to start digging out a hole in the dirt for my fire pit. My hands cold and the rock cut into my fingers a few times. Then, I needed to find the right sticks to get the fire started. And then finally, get enough wood to keep it going if I did get one started. I didn't go out of sight of the clearing, as I collected what I needed. Exhausted by the time I thought I was ready, my pit was filled with dry leaves and small sticks. I sat down ready to try to get a fire started. I used 2 sticks I peeled the bark off at first. My hands became raw from rubbing them together. Frustrated, I didn't think I could get them warm enough from the friction to get anything started. I then tried the rock method. I didn't know if any rocks would do, or if my grandfather had a special type in his fire starting kit. A miracle of the night happened when I found the right rocks to smash together. One spark caught and I nearly fainted when the leaves burned and yet didn't catch fire. I kept trying until I had a very small flame that I actually fed with my breath. I've never been so proud of myself in my entire life. The smoke blew into my face, causing me to cough and eyes water. Still very happy for my very small fire though. There wasn't a way to tell how long I was out there for. The sun hadn't even risen yet, so at least a few hours. As I warmed myself by the flames, I heard something off in the distance of the woods. I heard it again. My chest got tight with hope when I recognized that the noises I was hearing were human voices. No one I knew, but still someone out here in the woods with me. With my fire still going, I would be able to see my way back to the clearing if needed. I hurried off towards the voices, so happy I couldn't speak.
Mine.
The voices were a warning for the person they were speaking with. It sounded strange, as if English wasn't their first language. Still, it was someone who could help. At least, that's what I thought. Rushing into another clearing, all my excitement faded when I saw what belonged to those voices. A dead, torn to pieces deer sat in the middle of the small clearing, blood soaking the grass and leaves. In the clear moonlight, I saw 3 pale things, figures, all hunched over in the deer, tearing in with their hands and teeth. All their limbs were skinny and far too long for their bodies. Each of them were pushing aside each other, trying to eat as much of the deer as they could. Skin pale and drawn tight against their bones, faces covered with blood, each of them bald, with a mouth far too large for their face, and their eyes, oh God, their eyes were missing. Each of them had black empty sockets. None of them noticed me, that is, until I let out a scream. All 3 heads darted up. Now knowing there was some fresh prey, I turned to run. Sounds from behind me said they were all starting to chase me. Tears came to my eyes, making it nearly impossible to see where I was going. I slammed into a tree hard enough to hit my arm to the point I thought it was broken. I tumbled to the ground, crying and pain. My moment of weakness enough for one creature to get on top, limbs on either side. The head looking around trying to hear where I was, the large mouth opening, dripping blood on my tear-stained face. The moment before the mouth filled with teeth tore my face off, a loud cracking sound echoed through the forest. The creature blown off. I screamed even more when a powerful hand grabbed my shoulder to drag me to my feet. Grandpa. I choked up when I saw him clearly through my wet eyes. He was holding a shotgun, ready to fire again. His face stern, not afraid or surprised of the creatures. I expected them to attack us. They somehow knew what the gun could do. Grabbing their dead, they dragged it deeper into the darkness. The moment they were out of sight, I heard the worst noise. Awful sounds of bones cracking and breaking. They were eating the one my grandfather had shot. It was all too much for me. I broke down crying, my grandfather silently bending over to pick me up in one arm. As he carried me through the woods, he stomped out my small fire on the way out. He didn't scold me for crying or getting lost. Him actually comforting me that night was the kindest moment we ever shared together. We arrived back by the time the sun was rising. My mother and father awake and worried out of their mind. They scooped me up when we arrived, and I cried all over again. Before we left, I was able to get my grandfather alone to ask him what happened. Those things wouldn't bother us at the cabin. I only saw them because I went too far in the woods. Apparently, he had a deal with them, that they were not to touch any humans as long as he fed them, and he also wasn't sure how many of them lived in the woods, or even what they were. He also said that he fully understood if I didn't want to come back to the cabin next year. I almost didn't, until he passed away of natural causes. I spent parts of my summer at the cabin. He wasn't able to get an indoor toilet, but he did mark the path to the outhouse with those solar charged lamps that people use in their garden to make sure that no one ever goes off the path again. I recently moved into a new apartment with my dog, Marbles. It's not a nice place by any means. However, it's the only option I had. I'm just now starting a new job, and I barely have enough money to cover rent, ramen, dog food, and of course, Netflix. So I moved to this small dirt cheap apartment on the outskirts of town because it's cheap, and also because it's pet friendly. No, it's not the best thing, but it's only temporary. The apartment is small, with only 3 rooms. The first room you enter is the kitchen living room, with a hallway in the back. The door at the end of the hall leads to the bathroom, and the hallway is the door on the right side to the bedroom. I don't have anything, or personal belongings, so the apartment is very bare. I never even bothered to decorate the place, because I wasn't planning on staying here long. We've been in the apartment for a few weeks, and everything seems fine. As we got comfy, Marbles took a liking to the couch in the living room. It wasn't a couch that belonged to me. It actually came with the apartment. Well, Marbles started sleeping on the couch at night. With that said, Marbles likes to get up and move around in the middle of the night. She would get up and come to the bedroom door and hope to get inside. I always sleep with the door closed, so she would stay to whine and paw at the door. Marbles had long nails that she hated getting cut, so you could hear her walking throughout the apartment if you were awake. After a few nights of this, I just started leaving the door open for her. From then on, she would come and get in the bed with me at all times of the night. This never bothered me. Many more weeks went by with nothing happening. However, one weekend, my Netflix session lasted a little bit longer than it normally does, and I was still up at around 2 a.m. in the morning. I was just wrapping up Stranger Things Season 2 when out of the corner of my eye, I saw it in the doorway to the hall. There was something peeking at me. I turned to look directly at it. It looked like the top half of a face, peeking from the left side of the doorway. The only thing I could see were two eyes, beady and black, staring at me. I was frozen, not sure if it was fear or shock stopping me from moving. I blinked, and it was still there. After a few more seconds, I started panicking and yelled out, "Who the fuck are you? Get out!" For a few more seconds, it kept staring, and then slowly began to pull away and out of view. Once I could no longer see it, it took a few moments to regain control of my body. Once I had, I jumped up and slammed the door, locking it. Marbles, who had been laying on the bed with me, was now sitting up and alert. I called the police and told them someone had broken into my apartment. After a while, I heard them knocking on the front door. Eventually, I mustered the courage to step out from the room and run to the front door. They investigated, and the landlord was called. No one was found in the apartment, and when the police had arrived, the front door was still locked from when I got home. There were no signs of breaking and entering, but I insisted that I saw someone. The police did one more sweep of the apartment before leaving, telling me that there was nothing more they could do. The landlord, to whom I must give credit, swapped out the locks the next day, giving me all new keys. He told me that it was possible that a previous renter still had a set of keys to the room and had possibly come in. The thought of that unnerved me, but the more I thought back on it, the less human the thing seemed to be. It took a few weeks and many sleepless nights to go back to normal, if you could call it that. I told myself that I could handle the stress, that we would only be here a little bit longer. During that time, I also bought a baseball bat, which I now kept beside my bed. Now, I still kept the door to the bedroom open at night, but only slightly open, so that marbles could slip in or out. I didn't feel comfortable seeing the doorway where that thing had been, but one night, Marbles came in and hopped in the bed like she normally does. She settled down and rested her head on my thigh, which is very common. I had been asleep and never bothered to open my eyes. I started drifting back off to sleep when I heard a sound. It was the sound of the nails of Marble as she walked. It came from the living room and was approaching the bedroom door. I was facing the side of the room with the door, and I opened my eyes, and Marbles was there, pushing the door open and coming in. A chill ran up my spine. Slowly, I looked over and down at the bed. It was there. The thing was resting its head on my thigh, looking right into my eyes. For a quick second, I got a look at it. It had a humanoid form, but it was impossibly inhuman. Its face was horrific, with those beady black eyes, long greasy black hair. Its body was elongated, and it looked as though it was made up of only bones with skin wrapped tightly around them. Its face then started to creep closer to mine, and I was finally able to move. I threw the blanket over the thing and jumped out of the bed, running to the front door. I could hear it scurrying behind me, along with Marbles running behind. When I got to the door, I turned to see both Marbles and this thing following. Marbles made it to the door first, and once she was out, I slammed the door shut. I heard and felt the thing slam against the door, scratching and banging against it. I could also hear its raspy breathing. Eventually, it all went quiet. My phone was still inside, but after a while, one of the neighbors opened the door after my crazy knocking. They phoned the police for me. The police weren't as friendly this time, but I told them that I had trapped the person inside my apartment. After a long search of the entire apartment, the police found nothing. I couldn't believe it. They scolded me and told me that if I called for this again, I would be arrested. I felt like I was going insane. Refusing to go back in alone, the landlord actually joined me while I packed up all my belongings. I wasn't staying there any longer. My parents had an extra room they offered me, and it was going to take a long time before I felt comfortable being alone again. I'm typing this all out for my parents' house, laying in the guest room. Well, a few paragraphs ago, I noticed something. Over in the corner is a closet with folding doors. It's slightly open, and in the crack of the doors, I can see two beady black eyes staring right at me. The nighttime brought two rules we had to live by. No matter what family you come from, you are to not look outside or be outside. This one night brought my brother to sneak out to meet a girl who lived nearby. Teenage stuff, if you get what I'm saying. Anyways, the later hours of the night, and he's sneaking back through his window. As he's getting ready to pull himself in from the absolute darkness of the night, he heard my dog growling a few feet behind him. The dog we had at the time was from a known, highly aggressive breed, but to hear him growling came as a surprise to my brother. He claimed to call out soft to the dog, but the dog was unresponsive. After a few seconds, my brother slowly began walking towards the dog, and as he got closer, the smallest glint of light hit my dog's face. As his face softly lit, my brother realized that the dog was not looking at him, but the area of the roof right above his bedroom window. As he slowly turned and looked at the empty space, he began to recognize that heart-sinking feeling of somebody or something watching him, along with the sounds like if something was sitting perched on the edge of the roof. The more time went by, the more dread he felt. He was so scared that he rushed through his window and to our mother, panicking and telling her what he did and what was going on. She was so scared she wasn't even bothered by the fact he snuck out. I remember watching and listening from my bedroom door and seeing her turn pale and begin to shake. She told him to never do it again and to keep his window closed. It was from that day on that not only our neighbors, but people from the complete opposite side of the community began to open up about their experiences with the thing that walks among us at night on the roofs of the house. One of which includes a close relative who was home alone with an aunt. One night, she claimed to begin hearing something clawing and walking on the roof. When she noticed it, she said it was like it noticed her or knew she was there, because when she tried to find a room to shield herself in, the footsteps followed right above. Think of your ceiling made out of glass, and this thing always knowing exactly where your foot is falling, and the exact moment you extend your foot, there is another step. It wasn't until I reached my 20s that I began experiencing this creature on a weekly, yes, I said weekly, and I am not exaggerating. It was like clockwork, especially once snow began falling. Heavy footsteps before the sun was up that woke me up around 5 a.m. at least once a week. Here and there those footsteps would be substituted for what I only imagine is a grown man in steel-toed boots running with what sounded like chains dragging. I was so desperate for sleep and to not be bothered that I started putting holy water on my ceiling, but it seemed to only hold off whatever this being was for a few days before coming back again. As time went by, not only did my neighbor, but the residents who lived several houses away would tell my family about their experiences with the thing that lurked on top of our houses. One neighbor was simply sitting in the living room when he began to hear like somebody was walking above him. He said it left him paralyzed with fear, and all he could do was sit and stare in horror at the area above him, Another friend who lived 3 houses down was taking out her garbage when she heard walking right above her doorway, and left her so scared she ran inside and refused to be out at night for months. I can go on and on about the stories that left our friends, family, and neighbors shaken to the core for hours, but for now, this seems to be the most nightmarish creatures our people have continuously shared the space with since we were forced into colonization. Even though these stories and these experiences can spark a lot of interest in seeking out these beings, I simply ask that no one actually take the time to. You never know what might follow you and make your home its home as well. Maybe those noises you hear in your attic at night when you're going to sleep are actually coming from your roof, and maybe it's something that has followed you already because of these stories and these experiences that you dig into. If you think you have one of these things making your home their home, I would recommend to call a priest or a medicine man, somebody who's familiar with these things, because if not, next time it might be outside your window. Let me start off by saying my husband is native, and this happened about 6 years before I met him. My ex-husband was stationed in San Diego, and I flew out there to visit him. Unfortunately, I wasn't allowed to stay with him on the base for whatever reason. Don't ask me, cause I don't even know myself. Also, I should add I had just given birth about 3 months before this, and I had my son with me. I found a hotel that wasn't far from the base and close to food and whatnot. I went out to get some food and then walked back to the hotel since it wasn't far. Unfortunately, with my horrible sense of direction, I got lost and ended up near a wooded area. But there was a highway also nearby. It was getting close to sunset, and I started seeing sets of shining eyes, and I thought they were just coyotes. I'm not afraid so much. After about 20 minutes, one set of shining eyes got closer, and I saw it was a coyote. I remember watching Steve Irwin as a teenager, and remember that if you make yourself appear bigger and more loud than you actually are, they will most of the time run off. So I started clapping my hands and shouting. This one, however, didn't. It actually stood up and started walking like a person. I have never run away from something so fast. It never followed me, and I wasn't going to stick around to find out what it was. It wasn't until I met my current husband that I found out what it was, and the look on his face when I told him this story, he actually went pale. He never said anything. He just kind of nodded like he understood. Maybe it knew I was still semi-healing from having recently given birth, or it saw my son in the stroller I was pushing and just wanted to scare me. Either way, I don't know. I just know that it succeeded in scaring me. This isn't really a question. It's more or less me telling the story of how I saw a skinwalker, and I didn't even know what it was at the time. If the time stops at 1:09 a.m., roll over and pray that they think that you're asleep. If you're wondering who they are, well, that's the weird part. It's your family, or your roommate, or whoever you live with. I never heard of this happening before, so I'm not sure what I can really do about it, other than pretend I'm sleeping, of course. That's the only thing that really seems to keep them docile. Let me explain what's been happening in a little more detail. This has been going on for the past 3 nights now. I didn't really think too much of it the first night, because, honestly, I thought my family was pulling some prank on me. That is, until last night, when I was attacked by my own wife. The first night was a pretty early night for my wife Kelsey, and my twin boys Eric and Aaron. All of us were out cold by 9 p.m. We had a pretty long day of splitting wood to stock up for the upcoming winter. That night, I woke up to an odd silence in the house, like everyone had left and I was alone in the house. I grabbed my phone and checked the time. It was 1:09 a.m. I looked over just to check if my wife was still asleep, and when I found the bed empty, I sat up and looked around. The house was pitch black other than the hall light by my boy's room that we left on, and with that light, I could see 3 shadows cast along the hallway wall as my bedroom was left open. Kelsey? I called out. That's when I saw the 3 shadows twitch at the sound of my voice, like they were startled. Kels, I called just a bit louder. This time, a shiver went down my spine as all 3 heads of the shadows looked in my direction. What the fuck? I whispered to myself, tossing the blankets off from me as I got up to investigate. I tiptoed to my door with a feeling of unease growing in the pit of my stomach. Once I got to the door, I peeked around and was pretty creeped out at what I saw. Kelsey and the boys were all standing still, with their bodies turned towards the boys' room. Their necks, however, were straining to stare directly at me. Huge smiles that looked painful to maintain were on all of their faces. What the hell are you guys doing? I asked with a chuckle, thinking they were playing a joke on me. Now that I think back at it, it doesn't even make much sense thinking they were joking. After all, why would they get up in the middle of the night for that, when there's no guarantee that I would even wake up? Their bodies made a twitchy, unnatural movement at the sound of my voice, which made me jump back in surprise. This was when I really started to think something might be wrong. A feeling of dread washed over me, and I began to sweat. Then, the sound of the clock on the microwave began to beep, and as it rang through the house, it made me jump in the air as I let out a startled yelp. My boys turned instantly and walked back into their room, Kelsey doing the same. Her smile disappeared and she walked by me like a zombie and crawled back in bed, snoring as if she were sleeping the whole time. Confused as hell, I walked back to my side of the bed and checked the time on my phone. What the fuck? I said to myself as I noticed the time. 1:10 a.m. No way that only a minute had passed since I first woke up. It had to have been at a very minimum of 5 minutes. Still though, I shook it off and got back into bed, deciding to bring it up to Kelsey in the morning. The next morning I woke up and everything was back to normal. I could hear the boys playing in the living room and smell bacon and eggs as Kelsey cooked breakfast. I got up and walked out with a smile as I remembered their little joke from the night before. "Good morning, pranksters," I said with a laugh. They all stared at me with a confused look on their faces. "Huh?" my wife finally said. "Last night, all of you standing in the hallway smiling at me. Gotta admit it was a good one. It sure creeped me out a little bit though," I said, shaking my head. "Ryan, don't even joke like that. You know those creepy smiling people stories freak me out," Kelsey scolded. "Hey, you're the one trying to freak me out in the middle of the night," I said. "By the way, how in the hell did you get the phones to stop at 109? That was a good touch." My whole family was looking at me like I was a nut job. Then, they all started shouting it wasn't funny and that I was scaring them. I was shocked. I didn't know if they were still in on the joke, or if somehow they had all been sleepwalking. That wouldn't explain the time though. "Alright y'all," I shouted. "I must have been having a damn dream. Don't freak out on me, shit." I turned and walked back into the room even more confused than ever. I knew I wasn't dreaming. Were they serious about their little prank? Or did they not actually remember? Either way, I figured I would settle it that night. I would simply record them with my phone if they try to do it again, that's gonna ruin their joke pretty quick. Satisfied with my plan, I went about my day. The boys helped me split more wood, while Kelsey did some running in town. Before I knew it, it was nighttime again, and we were all in bed. I made sure to have my phone charged and right next to me, ready to catch them in the act. Once again, I woke up hours later, and that same eerie silence filled the house. This time, my adrenaline started pumping as the feeling of dread hit me like a ton of bricks. I grabbed my phone and lit the screen up. 1:09 a.m. I tried to switch it to record, but my phone was frozen. Fuck, I yelled. I looked over to the hall and saw the same shadows as the night before, but this time a little bit closer. My blood ran cold as I noticed out of the corner of my eye that the TV was left on, but the picture was frozen. It seemed that all electronics were frozen or something, adding to the creepy feeling that was engulfing my body. I got up once again and tiptoed to the door. I peeked my head around, and I had to cover my mouth to quiet a scream. Kelsey and the boys were standing facing me directly this time. Only somehow, their smile was even bigger than before. And now that they were a good 5 feet closer, I could see just how wide open and bloodshot their eyes were. When I moved my hand to cover my mouth, all three of them took a giant step towards me. Naturally, I took a step back. They mimicked with another huge step. This time, since Kelsey was bigger than the boys, she stepped ahead. She was now maybe 3 to 5 feet away, her eyes opening even wider as she looked extremely excited. I turned around to jump back in bed, and as I did, I heard loud footsteps as they gave chase. That's when I felt huge blows hit my back, a lot stronger than any of them should be able to inflict. "What the fuck, y'all?" I shouted as my back started to hurt from the impact. I was now in bed and I yanked the covers over my head. It was childish, I know, but hey, I wasn't about to strike my wife. Thankfully, as I lay still, the blow stopped, and I heard heavy breathing from what I assumed was Kelsey, only it sounded way too deep and raspy. Then, the breathing stopped altogether, and silence filled the room.
"I know you're not asleep,"
she whispered so fast I barely made out what she said. Just then, the beeping of the microwave filled the house, and the TV resumed. I heard the sound of soft footsteps leave the room as the boys went back to their rooms, followed by pressure next to me in bed as Kelsey climbed back under the covers. I quickly grabbed my phone and checked the time. 1:10 a.m. This doesn't make any fucking sense. I did my best to go back to sleep, but needless to say, I didn't sleep much. I tossed and turned as I tried to figure out what the fuck was happening. I tried to figure out what steps to take next. The only thing I could think of was to pretend that I was asleep next time, since my lack of movement seemed to stop the blows. If they thought I was asleep altogether, maybe they would just stand creeping in the hallway. It was worth a shot, I guess. I'll update tomorrow and let you guys know how last night went for me. It was still extremely scary, but hey, I didn't get attacked, so that's a start, right? I got another plan for tonight too, but I'll just put that in the update tomorrow. Wish me luck, and if anyone's got any idea as what to do here, please feel free to help me. I love camping, but after my most recent trip, I don't think it will ever be the same. I set up my tent on nice, flat ground and collected some wood for a fire. The night came with all its nightly sounds, and I relaxed at the owls and chirping crickets. Even better was the fact that no one else was around. Hell, it was subtle. I almost missed it. The voice came from deep within the woods, and for a moment, I didn't believe what I was hearing. It sounded almost like a female, but strange enough, I just couldn't tell. Please help. It continued. I shined my flashlight between the bushes and walked around. To be completely honest, even as a grown man, I was paralyzed with fear. So, I did the responsible thing and called the local police. That's when things went from being odd to very, very weird. The police actually told me to ignore it. I explained to them that someone could be injured and maybe needed medical attention, but they assured me otherwise. When I kept pushing and asked why, they told me, "Sir, if you ever hear that voice again, ignore it, do not respond, and do not approach." Well, I did hear it again, but I didn't ignore it. It was almost midnight when I heard the voice a second time. I awoke to someone whispering, "Help," and it sounded like she was just outside my tent. I went outside to check and no one was there, but the voice continued from a distance. "Help, please." Again, I grabbed my flashlight and looked around the area I was camping. I was too afraid to follow the voice into the woods, especially since the authorities themselves avoided it. But I struggled morally, trying to decide whether I should go and help this person or listen to the police, who were concerned for my safety. But then, I heard another, different voice. This other voice, which also seemed to be coming from the woods, was an octave lower. Unlike the first one, which cried for help, this one was loud and demanding.
Quiet.
The other voice demanded.
No one's going to help you.
Once I heard that, I was pretty sure someone was in trouble, so I called the police again. When I informed them about a second voice coming from the woods, they seemed even more concerned. They told me that I should pack up my things and leave the campsite immediately. They said that hearing the second, more manly voice meant that it was getting desperate. They also said that the two voices were coming from the same person. That part was bizarre and confused me, to say the least. It was at this point I dismissed the police in that area as crazy, but not before telling them off. I got angry. I told them that if they didn't get down here to come and check it out, then I would do it myself. I said that a woman could be in serious trouble and that it was their job to help her, but they still refused to come. All they kept repeating to me over the phone was, "Do not enter the woods, sir." They actually seemed more afraid than I was. Once I hung up the phone, I heard the voices again. A gentle, "Please, somebody help me." And then, a growling.
Quiet. No one's coming.
It was a little past midnight at that point. I couldn't live with myself knowing that I had the chance to save someone's life, but instead became a coward. So I grabbed some things and ventured into the woods. When I entered the woods, the voices ceased. Just like that. No cries, no whispers, and no commands. Even the owls and crickets went away. Nothing but dancing leaves and creaking tree branches. I stopped walking and looked around, a full 360 degrees. "Hello? Anyone here?" I called out. Nothing. "I'm here to help," I continued. "Where are you? Are you okay?" Still, nothing. I thought of calling the police again, then chuckled to myself. I found it strange, but somewhat comforting, that I didn't find anyone out there. Regardless, I was still creeped out. So I packed my things and finally left the campsite. I didn't know why the police, of all people, were so afraid. Worst case, someone was in actual danger, and we all failed them. To be honest though, when I heard the voice the very first time, I did think it was a joke. When I heard it the second time, along with that other voice, I became a bit more concerned. And same with the third time I heard it in the woods. However, when I heard it again, for the fourth time, a week after I left the campsite, coming from inside my own house, I became very, very concerned. Upon a recent discussion with an alumnus from a previous supply caravan to Black Mesa on the Navajo Res, it has come to my attention that one of the gals who accompanied the caravan a couple years ago had a very curious experience. I was able to get her contact info. Let's call her Amanda, and we'll interview her about her encounter. In an effort to be respectful of the culture and the taboo nature of the subject matter, we decided to change the names and category of whatever this is that she experienced down there. Just a bit of background, there is a company called Peabody Coal Mining, which leases tracts of land in and around Black Mesa, and the landscape is one of shadow topographical relief marked by dry draws and arroyos, which are essentially dry creek beds that flood during periods of heavy rain, which, granted, is not a very common occurrence in the high deserts of Arizona. This is what Amanda said. I was trying to retrieve a lamb who had escaped from the enclosure one afternoon. When I turned around, I couldn't seem to retrace my steps back to, quote-unquote, Johnny's compound, where his parents' hogan is located. I was following one of the arroyos, hoping it would lead me to a road. That's when I started having asthma. I think that I started hyperventilating and had a full-blown panic attack because I lost consciousness, and when I came to it, it was nighttime. I stood up and looked around. I heard something like a twig snapping behind me and turned around to look. In the pale moonlight, I thought I saw something ducked behind a tree. It looked like the dark shape of a person who had been peering around the tree, but then withdrew when I noticed it. But I could tell that it was still there. So I called out, "Hello?" Silence. "Hello? Is someone there? I'm with the Colorado caravan. I think I'm lost." I laughed nervously. "Can you help me?" After a moment or so, this figure peered back around the tree. Only this time, it looked like my friend Charlie from the caravan. The figure then stepped out from behind the tree and motioned me to follow, thinking that Charlie had been sent to bring me back to camp, and still feeling a bit confused. I started to follow the figure back up the draw. We've been walking for maybe 5 to 10 minutes when another figure seemingly materialized from the shadows out in front of us. I felt a bolt of pain, like a severe migraine, and had to stop. When I looked up, there were 3 more figures, and they were standing in a semicircle before me. Now these things did not look human at all, but rather like large coyotes, and I could see 10 eyes looking back at me in the dim silvery light. I started to stumble back, but the coyotes made no move to follow as I turned to run away. I ran for maybe 5 minutes before I stopped to catch my breath. That's when I heard another twig snap and looked back to see one of the coyote-shaped silhouette up on the ridgeline from back towards the direction from which I had ran. To my horror, the coyote appeared to stand up on its hind legs and let out a bone-chilling scream. I heard other people describe this before, but it almost sounded like a coyote howl, magnified through a megaphone, and then distorted with a heavy reverb-like sound effect. My head was pounding, but I truly felt in fear for my life. So I kept running. Eventually, I came to a service road and was able to flag down a Peabody mine worker who was driving down the road in a work vehicle. I convinced him to give me a ride and told him our caravan leader, Buck, could explain the situation to his manager if need be. As I climbed into the cab and we started driving, I looked in the rear view mirror and saw those eyes reflecting the red brake lights from the back of the truck. I don't think they followed us, but I couldn't be sure. So when the mine worker dropped me off at the compound, I ran into Johnny's parents' hogan, which is a big no-no for non-natives, but I didn't know where else to go, and I was still very scared. Johnny's parents only spoke Diné, but I was finally able to express the gist of what happened in between broken sobs and sniffling. I saw Johnny's father's face go pale as he realized what I was trying to say. He quickly shushed me and went to look out the window. Johnny's mom went to the stove and collected a small pan of ashes. She then dumped out on the table and started dipping bullets into them, loading them into a .357. She was singing what I can only assume was a Diné prayer for protection and looking worried at me. They let me sleep inside and nothing more happened that night. In the morning they called the medicine man to come and pray over me. We still had a couple nights left but decided to call the trip short after that. Johnny said not to worry, that the walkers wouldn't bother them anymore now that we were leaving, and that he was just glad that I was okay. Suffice to say, I won't be going on any more caravans anytime soon. I know everyone says not to go searching for these things, these skinwalkers. Well, I can't tell you how much I regret not heeding that advice. Now, I spent a considerable amount of time on the Navajo res in the past, so I thought I knew what I was doing. It's actually not that hard to find a skinwalker if you know what you're looking for, and if you do certain things, they'll come to you, as long as you're in one of the active areas. Such areas are in the path of the skinwalker, as it were, where a local clan of skinwalkers will come together to hold council and carry out their various rites and rituals and plan their evil doings. Kayenta, Arizona, is a town on the Navajo Nation at the intersection of Highway 160 and Highway 163. There's a pizza place there called Pizza Edge. Nearby is a car wash and a gas station, as well as a couple other little fast food restaurants. The whole area is just dirt, except for the mentioned highways, which are paved. Anyways, I mention this because that's about all there is to Kayenta. That plus a high school and a couple small hotels, a church, a post office, and a grocery store. The houses consist mainly of Navajo-style hogans and double-wide trailers. It all started in that small downtown area next to the Pizza Edge. As soon as I pulled into the small dirt parking lot, I noticed a Navajo man and a dog sitting in the shade. The man appeared to be asleep, but the dog was looking right at me, only its eyes were strange, vaguely human somehow. It was starting to get dark, so I went in to grab a slice of cheese pizza. When I returned, the dog was next to my car, standing on two legs and trying to get in my open windows. I shouted at the dog, and it dropped back to all fours and scampered off. I didn't see the man anywhere, so I got in my car and drove out of town a couple of miles to find a place to park for the night. I had a garbage bag with which I collected some roadkill along the way. I had found a dead coyote, a couple skunks, a raccoon, and a fox. I placed the dead animals out in a field where two natural draws met to form an open space next to a small pond. I had a hot cup of coffee, and I was ready to stay up all night if need be. At some point, however, I did fall asleep and woke with a start when I realized it was the middle of the night and someone or something was walking around my car. I grabbed my flashlight and shined it out the window. Boy, do I wish I hadn't done that. There was that dog again, except it was walking on two legs, peering in at me. I froze up. I couldn't move a muscle. The dog was breathing on the window, causing it to fog up in the light. Its eyes just looked wrong, like a human's eyes in the face of a dog. I jumped into the driver's seat and tried to start the car, but the engine wouldn't turn over. That thing was trying to open the door, and I could hear it scratching its claws along the side of my car. Finally, the engine turned over, and I was able to start the car. I hit the gas and sped out of there like a bat out of hell. I could see that dog thing in my rear view mirror, still running on two legs, before dropping back down onto all four legs and veering off into the night. I don't know what I was thinking, but that experience really scared me. Don't go looking for these things. They're out there, and they might just have you for dinner.